Well, the problem with going third at these events is that many of the things that you were just waiting to say, it's said very eloquently and probably in a more forceful way than I could say them. So I certainly second everything that David and Barry have both said. And I'll try to take us off in a slightly different direction. Before I come to these things, and those of you who have spoken at things probably have had the same experience, the night before you think, what can I say tomorrow? What's kind of new, or how can I bring this together in a new way or in an effective way? And what I find happens with me, and I don't know if this is a Freudian admission, but when I sleep the night before, I almost always wake up in the morning, and I jump up and I found the closest piece of paper I could find, which was a paper plate left over from last night's watching Jon Stewart roast our great former governor. And I made a few notes, and I want to start with a couple things about that, and then I want to shift a little bit to the work that we're doing at Fort Drum that some of you have worked with us on and most of you know about. Some political wise guy a long time ago, probably Eugene Debs or someone like that, brilliant guy actually, he said that, do we really in this country have one party, but it has two branches, and that's the Democrats and the Republicans. And that's, I think, a pretty accurate statement. I just want to give you a little bit of an example of why I think right now we can see that to be the case. 40 years ago, right now, 1968, we were just entering a very tightly contested presidential election. And those of you in the room who, like me, have gray hair or thinning hair or both, remember this very well. And at that time, we had the Democrats defending the war in the person of Hubert Humphrey. And LBJ, of course, had announced that he was not going to run again, and hoping probably to deflect enough of the opposition onto him so that the Democrats could hope to survive. I think that's generally the way his resignation is seen today. And on the other side, we had a well-known peacenik, Richard Nixon, I kid you not, who said, among other things, I have a secret plan. Secret. Now, only if you elect me will it be revealed. He was running as anti-war candidate, more or less, more or less. And so here we see 40 years later, we have, oh, the other thing about Nixon is interesting, I just got to throw this in, is there's a really pretty interesting book that's still around worth reading called The Selling of the President. And this book is by a guy named Joe McGinnis, who's a real sharp guy, wrote a lot of other books, but I think this was his best. And in The Selling of the President, he explains how a shift occurred in that election that was fundamental, what people nowadays would call a paradigm shift in the way we elect our highest official. And to summarize very greatly, he picked up on the theme of Marshall McLuhan, another very smart guy from Canada, actually. And Marshall McLuhan said we're in an era now when the medium has become the message. And you've all heard that phrase, and it's sort of a commonplace now. But if you delve into it, although you see there was actually quite a profound thought. And I won't try to parse it all and explain it, and I'm not even sure I understand it all. But the point of it was that Nixon realized that he had been seen as an old-style politician, take people down to the bare metal, crude, harsh. Remember, he was defeated in California and running for governor there, and he became very bitter and lashed out at the media. And so by 1968, he was repackaged. And it's interesting, the people that one was Dave mentioned is Haldeman and a couple of the others. And guess where these guys came from? The Disney empire. And they sat down with Tricky Dick, as we called him then, and they said, you've got to change your whole approach. And so essentially what happened was it became a campaign that was largely carried out in terms of debate as a televised exchange of symbols. And I won't carry this any further than this, but if you look today, and I have to admit, I turned on the TV the night of the South Carolina primary. You probably all did too. And I have to admit, hard, uncompromising, leftist, radical that I am, that I had a lump in my throat when I listened to Barack Obama. And Barack Obama, for two reasons. The main one, I think, is because it was amazing to me, having been in the civil rights movement, that someone could stand up in South Carolina, the home of Strom Thurmond, hundreds of lynchings and racist outrages, too many to number. And he could stand up there and give the speech he gave. But here's the thing, here's the warning that I offer. There was never a better practitioner of the media is the message than Mr. Obama. He's a master. And I don't know if, I think some of it is just innate to him, and probably some of you in the room will vote for him, and I might too. But he is a master of that media, the message. What is the point of all this? The point is that when you try to dig down beneath it to what is he going to do about one of the reasons that we're all here this weekend, the war, oh that, and the war in Afghanistan, oh that, the answer is, je ne sais pas. Who the hell knows? Nobody knows. And I'm not sure he knows, but I'll tell you one thing, and Hillary's even worse. I won't even go into her. She's even worse. Hillary gave an interview. This may have slipped some of you that don't daily read the New York, I don't have to daily read the New York Times like I do. She gave an interview with the editorial board of the New York Times 6 months ago. You might remember this, you guys. And she said, I can live with a permanent party in Iraq of 60 to 70,000 troops. That's Hillary 6, 7 months ago. So the fact is that neither of these people have any real plan, any real idea, or maybe, probably, I suspect, any real commitment to doing much of anything about this war. And so where does that leave us? It leaves us with the fact that, and I would argue also that we don't have the peace movement we had then. And it's not just to beat on ourselves. The peace movement in the '68 period was a big tent. Women's movements. The civil rights movement was alive. It's very interesting that Martin Luther King is still mentioned here as many times as he is tonight. He deserves that. The civil rights movement was alive and blazing in every area of this country and in the armed forces as well. The most exciting part to me of the film Sir No Sir was when he goes to Vietnam and he captures the dynamism, the militance of mostly black African-American troops. It was, that to me just said so much. And I really had the feeling there was, as Dave really alluded to, there's much more of that which really has never been told, and very too, has never really been understood. That was a big, big movement. And Dave alluded to this fellow in this article, not the article, but the mood of the command. This is Guy Colonel Robert Heinl, H-E-I-N-L, and he wrote an article, a very important article in Armed Forces Journal called The Death of the Army. That was published in 1971. If you want to go back, and I have a citation in my book here if you want to look at that's worth reading just in itself. And basically what he does is tick off everything that had occurred by 1971 in the U.S. military, and the things that these gentlemen have already referred to. Massive desertions, massive resistance, massive combat refusals, fraggings. 100,000 people deserted from the U.S. military in 1970 alone. 100,000 people. That's a big, big. That's about 6 brigades. That's a lot. And so that was the kind of thing that the military was terrified of. That's what, as David said very well, brought them to the bargaining table with the Vietnamese. And it must be said, the bravery, the courage of the Vietnamese. That has to be said. They're stoic. They're stoic. So, where are we? We today are in a place, let me finish the big tent business for a second. Women's movements, civil rights movements, labor movements, remember that? That was before Michigan, the state alone, lost 400,000 industrial jobs in the last 20 years. A labor movement that was vigorous. Not the guy this place is named after, he was an SOB, but many others. I can't believe we're meeting in his hall. I mean, it's amazing. If anyone ever spun in their grave, he's spinning tonight, I guarantee you. That's like an old fart, but I will. Okay. So, we stand here today. We don't have that kind of vitality and dynamism in our movements. We don't have, for a lot of reasons. One, because the civil rights movement made a lot of progress, and that's good. The women's movement, well, I'll leave that to women to decide, but there certainly is progress made there. And in the other movements, the labor movement, that's a whole nother story to talk about some other time. So, what are we left with? We were left with Tweedledum and Tweedledee. It's just that now, and to complete the picture of the fall this year, on the pro-war side, we got the GOP this time. And he's going to be pounding his 5.5 years in that. I mean, the thing that amazes me about him, I sound like Lewis Black now, but the thing that amazes me about him, I love Lewis Black, by the way. I love him. The thing about him is no one ever says to him, how the hell did you end up in the prison camp? I mean, what were you doing? I mean, were you just flying a nice a trip of tourists over to Phnom Penh? What was it? No, not exactly. I mean, in some ways, he's lucky he was taken prisoner. And many American troops could tell you about many Vietnamese that didn't have the same good fortune, actually. So, but that's beside the point now. He's going to be there in the fall, rah-rahing the war. Let's stay, what did he say the other day? We may have to be there another 100 years. 100 years? That's a hell of a long time. Well, even in Germany and Japan, in Japan we're not there much anymore, but even in Germany we've only been there 50. 100? Wow. Okay, so he's the GOP. He's saying we got to have more of the same and pile it on. And the Dems are saying, well, I don't think it hasn't really worked, and you know, we got to look at some other options. And well, I've got a general here that's told me, you know. So the long and short of it is, and believe me, this comes from having raised in a Democratic Union family in Michigan, but I mean, I got to say, I hope that on November 6th or whatever it is, that either Hillary or Obama is the president. I do. But let's have no illusion about what that's going to lead to. So you can all tell where I'm leading with this. I'm saying it's really up to the soldiers and sailors and Marines and the air members of today. It really is, to stop this war. And those of us on the outside, as the others said, we're proud to be here with you. We stand linked with you. We will do and will continue to do as much as we can and hopefully more. And I just want to take 3 minutes and touch on what we're trying to do at Fort Drum, because we've learned some things up there. We went to Fort Drum for a couple of reasons. One, because Fort Drum is the 10th Mountain Division is the most heavily deployed of any division in the U.S. Army. The brigade that left there this fall, most of the members of that brigade are on their 3rd tour. Those brigade tours now are 15 months. That means somewhere between 36, to be conservative, and 45 months in a combat zone. And if you saw the Ken Burns documentary on World War II, it was pretty good. I don't know if you saw it, and he has some psychiatrists, some therapists who studied PTSD very deeply and very seriously over a long period of time. And they said, we learned that after 240 days in combat, PTSD begins to manifest itself, be manifested. That's the average. There's some people that will manifest PTSD in a few days or maybe even hours, depending on what they're put up to or what they're forced to do. But that's the reality of this war. People serving. Vietnam, for most guys, I noticed that Ron had volunteered for another tour, Ron Kovic. Most people did 12 months home, thank God. Take the uniform off in the Oakland airport bathroom, throw it on the floor, run out and buy some tie-dyed shirts and get the hell out. That's what people did. Today, well, you can't get on a bus and go up to Vancouver anymore because the U.S. and Canadian military people put an end to that, as you know. Now, I know there's a struggle to try to open it, and I wish them well, but the fact is no American citizen has ever been given refugee status in Canada in the history of that country as a straight refugee. I'm not talking about during the Vietnam period. So those are big, big differences that we face. But so we went to Drum because the deployments are so heavy. The soldiers are so worn down there. The families are, you probably saw this story, it went out on the wire last week, a big story. The Major General of the base, General Oates, he says, you know, this drinking, driving has gotten out of hand. And as Eli was here tonight from Fort Drum, one of our realtors, Eli Wright, yeah. Stand up, my man. Oh, give him a round, man. You want to talk about courage. If you haven't served in the military, and I haven't, but I've worked around a long, long time, you don't realize the power that the command can bring to bear on you. The total kind of encapsulating power and authority they have over you when they choose to exercise it. And Eli and his brothers, Phil, and others there have stood up to it. And they deserve our deepest gratitude and our support. There's no doubt about it. But what he said to me, let's give him a hand again. He deserves it. But what he said about General Oates and his new plan, and so this is coming out in the press, you probably saw it, and I should have brought the paper, I wish I could hold it up here. General Oates decided that everybody on that base who'd been arrested for drunk driving, arrested, not convicted, arrested, was going to have their picture published prominently in color in the base newspaper. So there's page after page of these poor folks' pictures. Sergeant Jones, he was arrested at 11 o'clock at night on Highway 4. Sergeant Smith, and some women as well. And then a few they don't have pictures for. I don't quite understand why they don't have pictures of them. You'd think with our great security system they have pictures of everybody. But about a third of them, they have no pictures. Oh, okay. So, there's a limit? All right. So, that's cool. I could do that. So, he runs these pictures. So, Eli and I and Phil were up there last weekend, or I was up there visiting them. And Eli said, those guys are all in the 2nd Brigade. Almost all of them. He said, don't you get it? The 2nd Brigade just came back 4 or 5 months ago. He said the first couple months you get back from one of those tours, you're just in your community, the hell out of there. Enjoying your leave, whatever you're doing. Oh, man. And then you come back. And when you come back, you start training again for redeployment and new tactics and blah-de-blah. Okay, so General Oates, he's maybe a 2-star general, and he may be the commanding general of the base and of 17,000 soldiers, but he don't understand this one. So could it be that these folks are what psychiatrists call self-medicating? They're trying to somehow deal with what they've been through and what they're facing and how they're trying to confront all the questions of this war for them personally and their families? Well, so that's an issue we're at the different drum we're going to be raising, and we hope to get the New York Civil Liberties to support us in it, because these are people, talk about due process. You know, Barry was talking about reading the 4th of July Independence, Declaration of Independence. Well, how about in that independence statement, there is a line called due process, that you shall be accorded something in line with the recognized mechanisms of a judicial system. Not to General Oates. Guilty as charged. And that's just a small sense of what they're really about up there. And it's no different than at the other bases. So I want to just finish with a little bit about different Germany. So we went there because it's the most deployed base. We know there's a great need, and hopefully we can develop a greater interest in what we're about and what we are offering and trying to hold out to people. I want to make a couple of quick points about that. One is there are many types of organizing. Coffee house, which we're trying to do there, it's seen as an experiment, seen as an attempt to change. We know we're an all-volunteer force now. I explain it in my book. If any of you'd like to, I have a few copies. There is a great difference in a draftee or draft-infused, as Dave said, draft-enhanced military and the one we have today. It's not representative of the cross-section of the society. Pay and benefits are competitive. It's better than night window at Wendy's. It really is. How many other low-ranking workers do you know that have insurance, health insurance, or the whole families? Can you name any? Target, you want to bet? You know, nowhere. And third, 20 years you stick it. If you could stick it, who's getting a pension at 38 these days? Who gets a pension at all these days? Right? So these are things that they've changed, has changed the conditions of employment and make people react differently to the military than the draftee force. All right. So there's many ways to resist. Counseling, certainly important. GI rights hotline, one-on-one, groups. We do it at the drummer. We have people come in all the time. Can't get help, can't get PTSD care, can't get even seen by a psychiatrist, much less get help. Another thing we're starting to try to do there is work with families. And this doesn't always have an anti-war component to it. You're going to have families that will say, well, I don't know what I think about the war, but my husband's really sick. So you go with that, and that's what we try to do there. The other thing is Dave and the others said, I'll wrap up on this, there are many types of resistance. There's petitioning, there's challenging orders, small and large. There is seeking discharges, COs, hardships, other types. There's one thing we just did up there was filing for a court of inquiry. People don't realize it, but there's actually some parts of the UCMJ, the Code of Military Justice, that actually provide some real rights if they're recognized. And one of them is a court of inquiry. And there was a famous court of inquiry 30 years ago, and Dave probably could tell me what it is, right? The Pierce Commission, which investigated the My Lai massacre. because this was so engulfing and so large and so monumental in this country at that time, they felt they had to do something, and they appointed a 135 Court of Inquiry to investigate it under General Pierce. So we've asked for one of those just this last week up there for this whole scandal. We're going to be talking about tomorrow at 11:30 with the whole veterans care and the whole active duty military care issue. Finally, the speaking out publicly. Then there's urging disobedience of direct orders. There's refusing to deploy. And then, of course, there's leaving military control. And finally, of course, and maybe the most heavy, we used to say, combat refusal. You know, in the zone, beyond the wire, refusing, changing orders, and that sort of thing. We know some of it goes on. So let's be creative. Let's look at it. My message to IVAW, more than anything else, and I've said it to a lot of you guys and women, let's get the GI movement let's make it a priority. And let's, however we can do that, however that can happen. I know at Fort Hood there's something going on. I know in Hawaii, one of our brothers here tonight is going out to Hawaii and starting something. We've got a brother at Fort Meade that's doing some things. We need to encourage that wherever we can, because I'm telling you, the soldiers and sailors and Marines of airmen of this country and airwomen are the crux that's going to end this war.